I want to actually point out something different. I want to point out some of the comments we got on the YouTube channel from this video. A couple were, one was from a Big Four employee or former Big Four employee, and they said this is also true. Another was a consultant who worked for um, Deloitte, IMB, Accenture for 24 years, they said. And they said it was the same everywhere they went, and clients don't really see what's happening. And then this last one really kind of stuck with me. It was, if I had a dollar for every firm that called me to clean up the issues caused by these firms, I'd be retired. I feel like that last one is just such a good, encompass of all the different comments we got from people saying, like, thank you, Eric, for bringing this to light and agreeing with it. And I think that speaks to this really not being talked about that much, and how much of a problem it really is. I mean, the biggest takeaway, I guess, for me would have been how deep this bias really runs for these companies and how it really seems like they're just selling instead of consulting a lot of the times. So I think there's a lot of problems that go within it. But I guess with so many ex consultants confirming this or current consultants confirming this, why do you think that companies are still, I guess you could say, like, falling for it?
Man, that's a good question. So many different directions we could take that question. I'm trying to decide which. And I have very strong opinions about this whole topic. Obviously, as you probably sense from the video. Um, well, first of all, let me say this: I was really surprised at how many people validated what I was saying. I expected there to be a lot more people coming to the defense of the big consulting firms, and there are some on there and I think most of the counterpoints to mine were very respectful, and it wasn't like a lot of hate that I was expecting to get. It was more like, hey, this is, I appreciate your videos, but this is where I think you're wrong. This is the value that that big consulting firms can provide. But it was really interesting how many people just validated it all, in that, and why companies ignore it. I think it is such a rigged industry. I mean, it is such a constructed ecosystem of perpetuating self-interest that it's hard to break. And what I mean by that is, you think of like Accenture and Deloitte, you get all these people that work their butts off to get to partner. And then a lot of times those people, on their way up will move to other companies, and then they end up hiring that same firm because that's where they came from and all their buddies work at that firm. And so you get this sort of incestuous sort of mindset. And then you add to the fact this perception that no one ever got fired for hiring IBM or no one ever got fired for hiring Accenture, which is total garbage, but it is the perception. Because you pick any one of those big names, I'll give you a list of CIOs who have been fired for hiring them. But yet people still have this perception that it's the safe bet. Or what's really interesting, and I didn't talk about this in the video, is what's really interesting is I feel like a lot of CIOs and organizations are so risk adverse. And this sounds sort of twisted and warped in some ways, and it is, but they're so risk adverse that they think they'd be better off failing by hiring a big name rather than taking the risk of failing by hiring a no name. And so I think there's sort of this resignation or this hedging mindset that goes into this, where a CIO says, well, this project is high risk and it's likely to fail. And if I'm going to go down in flames, or if it is going to run into challenges, I want to at least have covered my ass by saying, at least I hired IBM, or at least I hired Accenture. I hired a big name. I spent a lot of money. I did all the right things. But I can make a pretty strong case that you're actually doing the wrong thing, and you're making your odds of failure higher by hiring one of those big firms. So I don't know. I don't know if that really answers your question of why it is, but that's one of the dynamics we see, that twisted mindset of risk aversion, as well as the perpetuating self-interest. And then, the other thing I'd add in is that, these big consulting firms are just the masters of selling. I mean, they're so good at it. And in fact, I learned a lot about how to sell by working at one of these firms, because they're so good at it. And they're so good at spin. They're so good at protecting the client from the truth, protecting the client from inefficiencies, protecting the client from all the internal political crap that they do as big consulting firms. I don't know, they just have a good way of making clients feel good. While shit's hit the fan over here, they have a good way of making the client feel good about it. And I don't know what it is. It's just sort of a political finesse that these big companies have. I saw it firsthand. I mean, if you're a partner, you're really good at that. You have to be good at that to be a partner at one of these firms. You have to be really good to take a shit show of a train wreck over here and make a client feel good about it or feel okay that everything's going to be fine. And they're just good at it. I don't know. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I guess one question I have going off of that would be, I guess, if there is any trust being lost in these big firms, who's really filling that gap?
Well, I mean, our goal is to fill the gap, as a company at third stage. And that's why I started the company, is because I wanted there to be a really good alternative to the big consulting firms. In other words, I wanted us to be former big five consultants that are sort of jaded from having worked at these big consulting firms. And that's what a lot of our team is. And in fact, that is one of the critiques. That's probably the biggest criticism I got in that video was, well, you're just saying that because you are an alternative to the big consulting firms, and it serves your self-interest to convey that message. And that's true. It does help us. If people see what big consulting firms are all about and the real flaws and the warts with big consulting model, then yes, they are going to gravitate to companies like us. And yes, it's going to benefit us. But does that mean we shouldn't point out what everyone seems to be validating, which is the big consulting model kind of sucks? That's kind of what we're saying here. And it seems as though the market is agreeing with us, or at least people viewing the videos and consuming the content seem to agree with that. So, it's sort of like, it's a weird thing. It's almost like the biggest criticism we got on that video was, well, you're just saying that because it helps you. Yeah, it does. It does absolutely help us. But does that mean I shouldn't point it out? And so I guess that's the big takeaway for me there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great video, though. Lots of things brought to light that I think are really interesting and we don't hear a lot from other people.